clock's ticking, and in a good way I say that because it's not that far away until the fever break is done and we get back to action here in the Hungry Jacks NBL. We are all hanging out for games to start, but in the meantime, we've just been trying to fill the void a little bit here on NBL Now with some mid-season reviews. We're taking a look at each team, taking a look at what's working for them, perhaps what's not working, and what it looks like for the remainder of the season. I'm Jack Heverin. Today, we take a look at the Adelaide 36ers, and it gives me an enormous amount of pleasure to welcome John Casey back to NBL Now. Morning, Case.
Morning, Jack. Never a dull moment. Yes, we want the games to come back as soon as possible, but there's been so much to digest, particularly here with the Adelaide 36ers. But I have to say, I've loved the mid-season reviews from each of the teams, and our commentary team haven't held back, have they? We've had Brad Rosen suggesting that the Tasmania Jack Jumpers, the reigning champs, aren't going to make the playoffs. And then Tom Abercrombie tells us that the New Zealand Breakers aren't going to finish top two. So they've got some hot takes. I don't know if I can match them in terms of what about I'm to deliver, but certainly a lot to digest.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. If you've missed any of our episodes, you can jump back on however you download your podcasts or, of course, nbl.com.au to listen to all of them in preparation for Thursday. We are talking 36ers. It's timely that we had this one booked to talk on a Tuesday morning because we had the tribunal findings land last night with Montrezl Harrell, who's been suspended for 3 games and fines totaling up to $3,685 after 2 charges of striking were upheld and, of course, a charge of engaging in a melee. And then Kendrick Davis has been suspended for 2 games after the single-member tribunal upheld a charge of inappropriate grabbing or handling of a spectator. Everyone's got an opinion, Case. The floor is yours, my friend.
It does seem that everyone has an opinion. Look, I think that they've really been hard done by the Adelaide 36ers, and I just feel that most of these, the suspensions for the 2 players are largely due to the crowd interaction. And I think they were provoked. And I'd like to hear the audio about that. Montrezl Harrell was mic'd up for the game. It'd be interesting to hear if anything was caught there. Mike Wells had a microphone on as well. But if they were provoked into that scenario, and the contact, from what I could see, and a lot of it is a little bit obscured, it wasn't that serious. Yes, there shouldn't be any contact, but Montrezl Harrell was still half on the court when he was into the crowd. And Kendrick Davis, if he's being provoked, then perhaps fines rather than suspensions were the way to go to this, because Harrell out 3, Davis out 2 could really derail the season for the Adelaide 36ers. And they're in a precarious position at the moment, 4th, 6th and 5. They can't afford to be short-handed. And now we hear that Lat Mayen is injured from the FIBA Africa qualifiers. If he's not available, well, their chances of beating Tasmania this weekend and then travelling to Brisbane are certainly going to be tough.
Yeah, and I guess, as I say, everyone's got an opinion on the suspensions, and yours is certainly as valid as everyone else's. What I sort of worry about here a little bit for them, Case, is the mental toll of the last fortnight as well. Like, that was 2 Sundays ago that this happened against Melbourne, in Melbourne. It's been the lead story in Australian basketball for nearly a fortnight now. They've now got the findings and they now know what it's going to look like. Are you concerned that, not just as a team, but as a club, about the toll that this has taken in the last week or 2?
Oh, without a doubt, Jack. I think it's a very good point that you make. But what I would say to that is, well, we've had DJ Vasiljevic, the captain's been away with the Boomers, so he's been removed from it to a certain degree. We know Montrezl Harrell has gone back to the US, and while he's been keeping tabs on it and has bought into it on social media, it's obviously been playing on his mind. And certainly we've got Kendrick Davis is one that I feel for. But for everything I see from Kendrick Davis, it says to me that he's a type of player that can handle most anything. But it has to have an effect. It has to have an effect on the team. And given that the 36ers have been through such a tough period where they haven't played finals for 6 years, and this was looking like it was all going to be rosy for them this year in terms of getting back to the playoffs, it does have to have an impact. And what I do know is it's certainly going to have an impact on the fans. The fans are furious about this whole situation. They're very parochial Adelaide fans, as everyone knows, and they feel they've been hard done by. So I expect them to be in full voice when the 36ers line up against Tasmania, no matter who they put on the floor.
Yes, and mark the Melbourne game in the calendar. I think that's going to be a very, very interesting contest, that one. So the 36ers, as you mentioned, 4th on the table, Case, 6 and 5. The home court has become a fortress for them. They've got the second best home record in the league, 5 and 1. That's a huge advantage for them, the fact that they're winning games at the Adelaide Entertainment Centre.
Look, no doubt, Jack. In fact, they're 5-0, haven't lost a game this year. In fact, they've on a 10-game winning streak at home, haven't lost for 355 days. You have to go back to December 28th to find the last game that they lost last year. So, look, there's no doubt about it. In terms of their positives this year, obviously the home court is a significant one, and you need to be able to get your home wins under the on board. But look, they've gone from ninth to fourth in points scored. They've lifted their three-point percentage significantly, and their turnovers have been reduced dramatically. So they're the second-best team in that area with turnovers. Last year, they were bottom three. So the biggest positives have been those numbers, and also the fact they're back in the playoff conversation, or up until this point with these suspensions, they certainly were as well. If you look back to this stage last season, when we went into the FIBA break, they were 8, 4 and 7. They came back from the break and they lost to New Zealand. Then they went to Tasmania and scored 59 and lost there. And then CJ Bruton was sacked. So if you compare this year with last year, then they're certainly in a much better position. So there are a lot of positives. And with a 6-5 record, fourth on the ladder, Coach Mike Wells seems to be stable in what he's doing there. Notwithstanding these suspensions, they're much more competitive this season. So I think there are a lot of positives on the year overall.
So loads of positives. What's their biggest challenge?
Well, biggest challenge is getting everyone on the same page. And I know most teams struggle with that, but Mike Wells coming in late to the organisation, from the assistant coach's role up to the head coach's role is something they've had to work on. And then Jarrell Martin being injured meant that Montrezl Harrell came in late. So there's still a work in progress. There's still certainly a lot of things that they can improve on. And certainly defense is an area that is challenging them at the moment. They need to get better at the defensive end. That's going to be their biggest challenge. And they need to reduce their best and their worst, because that gap is just too big at the moment. We've seen them lose games to Melbourne by big numbers, 3 games by 20 plus. That's going to hurt their percentage. And as we know, 5 of the last 6 seasons in the NBL, percentage has decided a playoff position. So they need to reduce those bad performances or get them, not as bad as they have been. But they certainly still have some challenges, including the fact that Harrell and Davis are going to be missing, for Davis for 2 games, Harrell for 3 at this stage.
Biggest surprise packet so far?
Biggest surprise to me, Jack, really has been the lack of minutes that Lat Mayen has been playing. And, of course, Lat Mayen, we understand, has now been injured in the FIBA Africa qualifiers. He only played 5 minutes in the first game. That did not suit up for games 2 and 3 for South Sudan. So let's hope that injury is not a dramatic injury that's going to force him onto the sidelines, because this would have been an opportunity for him to come back into the rotation with the suspensions. He was brought into Adelaide to play significant minutes and be a starting member. And I thought it was a great get for the Adelaide 36ers. Game 1, he starts, he gets a career high 23, had a real influence on that game against Sydney. But since then, he's lost his spot in the starting lineup with Montrezl Harrell moving into the first 5, and he's struggled to play any meaningful minutes. In fact, the last game against Melbourne, he played a minute 40. Now, Nick Marshall, and I'm a big Nick Marshall fan, don't get me wrong, but Nick Marshall played 23 plus minutes and Lat Mayen played 1.5. And I think Mike Wells said post-game that he may have got the rotations a little bit distorted and he needs to get better at getting his bench players involved, because he does ride his starters more than any other coach in the competition. So that's an area that I think that has surprised me, that Lat Mayen needs to play more. I think he can have a significant impact on this group when he's healthy. And let's hope, as I say, that injury isn't significant, because I think him getting more minutes is going to benefit the 36ers. But that has been a surprise, the fact that he hasn't been able to get into the rotation as much as I thought he would.
When we've been talking about the MVPs so far for each of these teams, sometimes we've had to scratch around a little bit to find an MVP. Not so for Adelaide case. You've really got 2, potentially even 3 genuine contenders for team MVP.
Well, look, without a doubt, they're blessed with some great talent, aren't they? I think Montrezl Harrell right now would be top 3 in the fans' MVP voting. I don't know if he'd be top 3 in the actual MVP. Certainly is going to get a lot of votes in that as well. But Kendrick Davis is the man for me. I think he's the 36ers MVP right now. He's been a significant contributor. He's playing a tough role. First season, point guard in a team that struggled in recent seasons. He's a leading scorer in the league at 21 a game. He's second in assists at near 7 a game. He's 6th in steals. He's had 21 assists in his past 2 games. And in that game against Melbourne, 30 points and 11 assists. No 36er has pumped those numbers in the last 15 years. Not even Jerome Randall, when he was league MVP, could he get 30 and double-figure assists. So they're significant numbers that Kendrick's been able to put up. And what's really impressed me is his willingness at the defensive end. I don't think he gets enough credit for that. Look, sitting courtside, I get to see what goes on, and I've seen him poleaxed on screens. Look, at 180 centimetres, he's just at that awkward height where he runs into elbows and stiff arms on screens. But he gets up, and his commitment to get to the next play is first class. And I think he's an underrated defender. And all those numbers suggest to me, the influence that he's had, that he is the 36ers MVP so far this season.
So with that said, Derek Rucker's top 15 was released and had Kendrick Davis at 12. Has Ruck just been sipping on a few too many pina coladas during this fever break case?
Well, that's been the suggestion that I've seen on social media. And of course, these are always great talking points. And full credit to Ruck. I dip my lid to him for, being able to put this out there, having the minerals, as we like to say, to put that out there, because there's always going to be criticism. But look, I'd have Kendrick Davis much higher than that. Clearly, he's second to Parker Jackson Cartwright in terms of the point guard having an influence on the competition. Leading scorer down at number 12, what he's done, I think he deserves. He's certainly inside the top 10 for me in the list that I had. But I guess Derek's, his way of answering is, well, who do you take out? But there are a couple of players ahead of him that certainly I would put Kendrick Davis ahead of. But a great talking point, and Ruck's copping the heat and taking it on the chin, and he does that very well.
Well, there's the headline from the show this morning. John Casey says, "Get off the sauce, Derek Rucker."
I love his work.
So, second half of the season, Case, what do we need to see more of from Adelaide? Is it at the defensive end of the floor, like you spoke about?
Yeah, I think everyone's in agreement with that. They really need to tighten up at the defensive end. They're giving up 94 points a game, which is, on average the most in the NBL. The defensive rating is 118, which is the second worst. But they also need to get road wins. They have to win on the road because the regular sellout crowds and the Adelaide 36ers at Adelaide Entertainment Centre, they get that support from the fans and they love it. They're on a 10-game winning streak, as I mentioned, but they just can't win games on the road. And their championship hopes are very slim if they can't find a way to do that, because they're 1-5 away from home this season. And over the past 2 years, they've lost 23 out of 28 games on the road. Now, this season, 5 of their last 7 games are on the road. That's going to decide whether they make the play-in tournament, whether in the top 4, or whether they miss it completely. So, and as I mentioned, those losses on the road have been significant numbers. Melbourne by 20 plus a couple of times. Look, they need to find a way to win that. I don't know what that is. Is it team sort of camaraderie? A lot of teams talk about getting together and isolating themselves as a team, and it's great for the team vibe. Well, I can't see that with the Adelaide 36ers. Their results just don't reflect it. And I think it's time for them to sit down, because they're going to have to win games on the road if they're going to be a part of the playoffs. And right now, the record isn't flash. So tighten up at the defensive end, but get the job done on the road. Try and pick off some wins here and there, or at least stay in games long enough to give yourself a chance and not be down 10 inside the first quarter and then chasing for the rest of the game and never really getting scoreboard pressure on your opponent.
I think that's a great point. It's not just that they're not winning at home, Case, is that in some of these games, they're getting wiped away from home. And to me, if we're going to talk about Adelaide potentially winning the whole thing or going to a semi-final series, that sort of thing just has to improve.
Yeah, and I don't know what it is, because they shouldn't go from being so good at home to so bad on the road. There's just no excuse for it. And even at home, they start slowly. So that's an area they can certainly improve on as well. At the start of the season, when teams were finding their feet, the first 39 games played in the league, it was 20 wins at home, 19 on the road. But now the teams have found their rhythm and have got their rotations and have worked out their game plan, or it's certainly improved on their game plan. It's got to the stage now where I think 11 of the last 12 games have been won by the home team. So it's got a lot tougher to win on the road now. But that's something the Adelaide 36ers, when they play teams beneath them on the ladder, then they're going to have to find a way to win. So, and they haven't been able to do that this season, nor have they been able to do it historically over the last couple of years. So it's a real challenge for them.
Two-part question to finish off. Mid-season grade, and where will they finish at the end of the regular season?
Yeah, it's a really tough question, isn't it? So much to unfold over the remainder of the season. And obviously with these suspensions, that plays into, their result as well. But look, the report card has a lot of ticks on it for the Adelaide 36ers. As I said earlier, scoring's up, turnovers are down. Defence, yes, still a work in progress. And losing Harrell and Davis through suspension and Latmain with injury, well, they're massive blows. But in the next 8 games, 5 are at home, and we know they perform well there, and they only play one team above them on the ladder. So if you're going to get players suspended, then perhaps this is the right time of the season for Adelaide. Not that you ever want to see players suspended. And I spoke to Grant Kelly, or certainly made contact with Grant Kelly last night, and asked if they were going to appeal this decision. And he said to me that they wanted to see the written findings first and digest that and then decide from there. But I have an inkling that perhaps they will want to revisit this and try and get this downgraded, because it's going to be so significant in terms of their season. And if they can keep Harrell and Davis on the floor, then their chances obviously improve significantly. And at this stage of the season, every win you can get is going to be vital. So, look, I'm optimistic that they can get it to be a play-in team and possibly top 4 as well. Let's not forget the 36ers finished 9th last season. So to be 4th now, nearing the halfway stage of the season, I think I have to give the Adelaide 36ers a B+ as a mark so far. Right now, where we stand, if you compare them with last season, they've improved dramatically. So B+ for me in terms of a report card. And at the start of the season, I said if they could get to the play-in situation, that would be a successful season for them, given that they haven't made the playoffs for the last 6 years. So right now, they're in that playoff mix, and that's where I think they're going to finish, somewhere around that 5th and 6th position. 3 teams above them at the moment, Melbourne, New Zealand and Illawarra. I think you're going to win more games than Adelaide for the remainder of the season, so I can't see them pushing into the top 3. They'll do well to hang on to that 4th spot given the circumstances right now, but I think they've got enough in the tank to finish 5th or 6th, and I think a B+ is where they sit in terms of a report card.
Well, as we record, this is first thing Tuesday morning. As Case said, Adelaide are still considering their options by way of appeal for the suspensions for Montrezl Harrell and Kendrick Davis. So more on that as it comes to hand. Of course, you can stay up to date via nbl.com.au and all the NBL's social media channels as well. Case, have a great day. Watching the Adelaide 36ers is forever a roller coaster. So we'll see what happens for the second part of the season.
Yeah, you're just spot on, Jack. I think it's almost becoming a Bermuda Triangle here with the Adelaide 36. You just never know what's going to happen next. But let's hope that this doesn't derail their season, because I think, the final word I will say on this, I think this has sabotaged their season to a certain degree if this unfolds the way that it stands at the moment. And given how hard they've worked, they deserve better than this. But tough times, tough times don't last, tough people do, is what I've been told. So the 36ers are going to have to get through this and keep finding ways to win, particularly on the road, and they'll be in the playoffs this year.
There's the final word. We'll catch you next time on NBL Now.